I am leaving on a trip in a couple of days, so today I wanted to sit down and film a really relaxed, laid-back video and just really talk to you. So today we're going to be doing an Hermes slash luxury Q&A, which if you've been with me for a while, you already know the drill. These are the videos where I try to address all your Hermes questions, concerns, and dilemmas based on my decade-long experience of buying the brand. Worst and best Hermes purchases ever. What a great question. I would say my first instinct is that the best purchase, without a doubt, is my Epsom Kelly wallet. I will take any chance to rave about the Kelly wallet. It's by far one of my not one of my favorite pieces, it's my most favorite Hermes piece. If there is an Hermes piece I would never part ways with, or God forbid my collection went missing, that's the piece that I would replace first, because it's one of those pieces that I use on a regular basis and I can turn it into so many different things. It's an incredible piece to have in your arsenal. So I would say that my Kelly wallet in Epsom. And then my worst Hermes purchase. Let me think. The worst, I would probably say my Birkin 40s, which were the Birkins that started my Hermes bag collection. And the reason they were a bad purchase is because I used them for a couple of years. Then I realized that they were just a little bit too large for me with my proportions, and I ended up selling them, and I lost quite a bit of money on selling those bags just because there was no demand for these larger pieces. In hindsight, I wish I hadn't sold them and I just hung on to them, but we'll live and we'll learn, because I did lose quite a bit of money selling those bags. So I would say that those were not the best purchase. And then I did make a mistake placing my special order bag a couple of years ago, because, well, actually a few years ago at this point, because even though it was a beautiful, really special bag, it just wasn't one that really suits me. I tried so hard to make that experience and make the end result special that I forgot about my own needs and what I really need in a bag. So that was a big mistake, kind of wasting that special order bag on something that wasn't really something that I or my collection needed, when I could have easily ordered something that perhaps wasn't considered as unique, but it would have been something that I'm able to use regularly. So that was a mistake, I would say, or that was a bad purchase. What is the biggest Hermes mistake? I assume you are referring to shopping at Hermes and mistakes people make when they are new to the brand. So what's the first thing that comes to mind? I would definitely say not really enjoying the experience, really being focused on buying stuff just so you can get your hands on a bag, and not focusing on what would actually bring you joy, constantly being worried about your pre-spend, how much you're spending, what you're buying, what will help you get a bag faster, instead of really trying to focus on pieces that would bring you joy, pieces that would help you explore another facet of Hermes. I think that's a huge mistake people make. Another one is comparing your experience to someone else's. You know what people say, comparison is the thief of all joy, which I think also stands when it comes to Hermes. I will often hear people say that I have bought this and this and this, I have spent this much money, while my friend only bought this and this, and they spent a lot less than I have, which I feel it's first of all pointless to compare your journey to someone else's, because you'll never understand all the circumstances. Not to mention that when people bring up spending and how much they have already spent, I always think, that there are so many people out there who have spent a lot more, who have been buying Hermes a lot longer, who have been waiting for a bag a lot longer. Buying an extra blanket, buying an extra plate will not make you stand out from the crowd at this point, and it will not make a huge difference. If you're buying things purely because you want to get your hands on a bag, it might work for your first and second bag, but eventually you will start resenting the brand. So unless you are clearing shelves, it's definitely not the argument that I would start with, that I have bought this and this and this and I have spent this much, because there's always going to be someone else out there who has spent a lot more than you have, who has been buying Hermes a lot longer than you have, who has been waiting for a bag a lot longer. So I know it's an unpopular opinion, but this is not what I would personally focus on. I would not compare my journey to anyone else's, and I would not focus on, hitting a certain amount of spending, whereas people call it a pre-spend to get a bag. Instead, buy things that you're genuinely interested in, be open to the idea of exploring new facets, and be really honest with the advisor that you shop with, because they are the people who have the best understanding of the brand. So they are your best resource, not only for information, but also for product recommendations. So we do have quite a few questions on exotic skins. Someone asked about the different types of exotic skins. Someone was wondering about exotic pieces, such as price, how to score one at the boutique, any shopping tips for pre-loved exotic pieces, price range, vintage, looking for sites, certificates, maintenance, etc. So basically a guide to exotic skins, which we can definitely do. So what do you have to know about exotic skins? When it comes to Hermes leathers, we can put them into different tiers. And when it comes to my tier making, as you guys know, I never go from the worst to the best. I never say that one is better than the other. I purely go from the least to the most expensive. So when it comes to Hermes leathers, the hierarchy in terms of pricing goes from regular leathers through heritage leathers all the way to exotic skins. So regular skins or regular leathers are things like Togo, Epsom, or even goatskin. Heritage leathers will include Box, Bervenia, the Butler, just to mention a few of them. And then on top we'll have exotic skins, which includes ostrich, lizard, alligator, and the different types of croc, all of which we'll discuss in today's video. Now, some people will argue that ostrich is not an exotic leather because it doesn't come with sides, which it is correct. That is the one exotic leather that doesn't come with any sort of sides. However, I still consider it an exotic leather, so I'm going to include it here. But most exotic pieces should come with something called sides, which is not a card of authenticity. It doesn't prove the authenticity of a bag. It's a legal document that states what leather was used to craft the bag, and basically verifies that Hermes didn't use any endangered animals to craft your exotic bag. It's a legal document that should come with most of your exotic purchases. But ostrich doesn't come with that, and ostrich is only available in one finish, whereas other exotic skins like alligator and the different types of croc usually come in 2 to 3 finishes. The most common ones are shiny, or also known as lisse finish, or in matte. Now, what's unique about both of these finishes, actually, I feel like a lot of people will be surprised by this, but actually both of these finishes are achieved by buffing the leather by hand. So when it comes to the lisse finish, they buff the leather painstakingly with a flat stone to achieve that really high shine glossy finish. But when it comes to the matte finish, to get that, the leather is also buffed, but it's actually buffed by wool felt to get that really soft matte look. And believe it or not, matte skins or bags made of matte skins tend to be more expensive than bags made of lisse, because in order for you to get that matte finish, the leather has to be perfect, because there isn't anything to hide any imperfections. But when it comes to the bag being in a lisse finish, those imperfections can be buffed away with the stone to a certain extent. And then there is technically a third finish, which is a satin finish, but you really don't see that often. It's something that was more recently introduced, but I have only seen that on, I think I've only seen that finish on Constance bags, so that is incredibly rare. Perhaps it's something that we'll see more and more of, but at this point I would say that the standard is the 2 finishes of lisse and matte being more expensive. But without further ado, let's jump into the actual exotic leathers, and let's start with ostrich, which, as I mentioned, some people will argue is not technically an exotic leather because it doesn't come with sides, which is correct. You will not get sides with your ostrich purchases. However, if you like the look of ostrich, which is definitely an acquired taste, it is not a leather that should be underestimated, because it is by far the most durable and least finicky exotic skin. It has this really cool kind of polka dot finish, which is because of the hair follicles, which a lot of people call pores. I even call them pores sometimes, but they're actually the feather follicles that give the ostrich leather this really interesting polka dot look. And I think the pattern itself, when you look at the entire hide, the way the polka dots are laid out, are what the experts call a quill pattern. And the more symmetric the quill pattern is, the more expensive the leather is going to be. Now, it goes without saying that Hermes will always select the best of the best, so it's not really something that you have to pay attention to, but do keep in mind that when it comes to any exotic skins, no two piece is going to be identical, because the pattern is a result of a natural process, so there is not much that you can do about it. So always make sure that when you buy an exotic piece, you have a really close look at it. Even if you are already an experienced exotic user, there is always going to be a slight difference, and the biggest difference is going to be the different quill patterns when it comes to ostrich skins. But if you're a fan of ostrich skin and if you love the look of these little polka dots, you can find this usually in smaller Hermes pieces, although because the leather is quite large, Hermes can also make it into larger pieces, but these days I think you will more often than not find it in smaller pieces. And as I mentioned, it is a really resilient leather. The only thing that you want to pay attention to is patina. This is a leather that is known for developing patina, which means that it will become more and more shiny over time, and it is prone to changing color. So if you pick this up in a Birkin or a Kelly, a bag that you'll carry handheld, especially if you pick it up in a more vibrant color, you will definitely start noticing some potential color change. Now, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, the most delicate, most finicky exotic skin that money can buy is going to be lizard. So much so that there was a point in time when Hermes actually had to stop producing bags in lizard, simply because they could not find lizard that met their quality standards, and their bags just didn't stand the test of time, at least not the way they were supposed to for the price. Now, if you are a fan of lizard, there are a few things that you need to know. Lizard bags have really tiny scales to them, and they are known for having a really glossy finish. However, they're extremely prone to not only pilling but also oxidization. So if you pick up a lizard bag that's made of a lighter color, for example one of the beloved ombre lizard bags, do keep in mind that they will not look like the way they do when you first buy them for long, because the lighter parts, the ivory parts, will really quickly start darkening and they will develop this yellowish hue, which is just not flattering. But there's nothing you can do about it. Not even Hermes can fix that or take them back to as light as they were. So that is something for you to keep in mind. These bags you want to be extremely careful with. You do not want to take them out often, and you want to keep them away from any sort of natural light and moisture. There is nothing you can do to prevent the bag from oxidizing, but there are things you can do to slow it down, and using your bag is unfortunately not one of those things, which I understand is counterintuitive if you spend so much money on a bag, but it is something that you have to be aware of. Use and enjoy these bags, but just keep in mind that they are not the easiest bags to look after. Above lizard in terms of price, we have alligator, not to be confused with crocodile. So alligator is different from the different types of crocodile, which there are a few ways to tell the difference between an alligator bag and a croc bag. Alligator bags, first of all, have a different heat stamp. So if you look at the Hermes emblem on exotic bags, you will find a little stamp that helps to identify the bag. And when you look at an alligator bag, you should find a little square next to the Hermes print above the twist closure. So there should be that little square, but if you cannot see that, or if the bag doesn't come with one, alligator is known for having slightly larger, more square scales, and the edges of each scale is a little bit more pronounced compared to the different types of croc, which I personally appreciate. I really like the fact that you can really easily see the difference between each and every single scale, and they almost have a little lip to them. Also, when it comes to larger pieces made of alligator, which you won't see them too often, Alligator tends to be reserved for smaller pieces. Not to say that they have never made larger pieces out of alligator, but alligator is a smaller leather, so you tend to find smaller pieces made out of this skin. But if you look at a piece like a bag where you do get a larger chunk of the leather, if you look at the center of the bag, there's usually a clear line that runs down the middle. Some people say that that divides sort of the center of the bag, and then the scale should go more and more gradient, but that's not always the case because there is usually not enough leather for you to see that beautiful gradients. But the scales are going to be larger, they're going to be more square, there is not going to be a symmetric pattern to them, they are going to be more pronounced around the edges, and then on some pieces you can observe a line running down the center. Now alligator pieces will come with sides, and it's also leather that's available not only in matte and lisse finish, but very rarely you will find it in a satin finish. And if you're wondering about the price, when it comes to quota bags, the least expensive quota bag will be a mini Kelly in matte alligator, which should start at just under $30,000 at this point. I personally love the look of alligator, and it is also the softest exotic skin out of the different types of croc, even though it's not a croc. When it comes to crocs and alligator tends to be softer than the different types of croc, which is why you will not only find it in cellier bags, but also quite rarely, but you can find it in return bags too. And last but not least, let's move on to the different types of croc that Hermes uses, which there are several different types that the brand plays around with. But the two that you have to be aware of, the two that you will see most often, are freshwater croc, or also known as Nilo Croc, and then seawater croc, also known as Porosus Croc. But let's start with Nilo Croc because it is slightly less expensive, and you'll recognize this leather because there are two tiny little dots next to the Hermes emblem to identify this leather, and also the scales tend to be a little bit bigger. There is less of a gradient, and the scales themselves are a little bit more elongated. Now what's interesting is that Hermes uses this leather for their Himalaya bags instead of Porosus Croc, even though Porosus is considered to be the most precious exotic skin out there. And the reason is that on Nilo Croc, even though on some pieces the pores are more visible than they are on others, more often than not the pores won't be quite as visible as they are on Porosus Croc, so there won't be anything distracting you from that beautiful gradients of the Himalaya finish. And speaking of gradients, if you like the most symmetric, almost man-made like gradients from the scales going from itty bitty around the edges to slightly bigger and bigger as you get closer to the center of the bag, Porosus Croc is the one for you. This one is by far a true beauty of nature. You can find the most incredible, almost perfectly symmetric gradients on some of these skins, which is why Porosus Croc is so insanely valuable. So the scales not only have a beautiful gradients to them, but they also tend to be more uniform. They are more of a square shape. However, something that I personally wouldn't enjoy myself is that each scale has a visible dot, which is where the name comes from. It's the natural pore on each scale, so that's something that you have to be aware of. And when it comes to the emblem used to identify Porosus Croc, it is a tiny, it's almost like a triangle without the bottom part, but even with little practice you can really easily spot and differentiate a Porosus Croc piece. This leather tends to be used for larger pieces, and one thing you have to know about this is that this is not only the most precious exotic skin, but it is insanely rare to find this in a matte finish. So if you find it in a matte finish, if you get one offered, if you see one at auction, just know that you are genuinely looking at a piece that is 1 in a million. And my friends, this brings us to the end of today's Q&A. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Please let me know in the comment section if you have any other questions that you'd like me to address in future Q&As, and make sure you follow me on Instagram and you are a subscriber of mine if you would like to submit questions for future Q&As like this. But I really appreciate you being here and watching, and I hope to see you back here with a new video really soon.